Hello and welcome back to the Self-Wealth Real Estate Podcast with your host, Luke Barron. Today, I'm interviewing Nicholas Brown of Four Capital. Nicholas is a mortgage agent. He specializes in commercial and multifamily properties. That is his bread and butter. So he's very well versed in CMHC, in MLI Select. He talks about his own deals, and he also talks about commercial conversions, including one that he's doing, and where he sees opportunities in the future. A lot of financing, a lot of real estate is tied to how to finance them, because so much of real estate involves leverage, and you can have potentially a pretty good deal that you can't finance, and it can make it a very bad deal. Whereas you could have more of a mediocre deal that can finance very, very well at low cost, or can have potentially existing financing, and you can make out like a bandit on that deal. So financing can sometimes make or break a deal. And so Nicholas talks about the opportunities there, where CMHC, MLI Select, where they're going, what they're doing, where there's opportunities, again, including in commercial conversions to residential. So you'll listen in. There's a lot to learn from Nicholas. We could have kept talking. There's so much more to cover on this area. But if you're looking at doing multifamily, 5-6 units and up, or possibly converting from commercial, there's so much covered here. I think this is a really useful episode. And thanks so much for tuning in. Tell me about what you did prior to getting into real estate and becoming a mortgage agent.
Sure. So before I got into mortgages, I actually, was like anybody back in 21, 20, learning everything I possibly could from YouTube and trying to figure out what I could do first. And basically before that, I'm 27. So I had just gotten out of school. I'd been working for a bit, jumped into a salaried internal audit position that wasn't 100% for me, but it allowed me to get a mortgage. And obviously back then it was a little easier to get mortgages. So that led me into my first kind of experience in real estate investing, which was a condo flip. It was one that seemed safe, got a great deal on it off market, and it ended up being super successful. So that kind of got the itch going. And then from there, I started figuring out that the mortgage side was what was the hardest for me. So obviously you go from a single condo to looking at 24 unit buildings because that makes sense. And that is what I did. So I started trying to figure out underwriting and that sort of thing. And that led me to, my ultimate goal of how can I be more valuable for others? And, from there, I got to the fact that, the mortgage agent in my eyes was the difficult part. The pro forma was the underwriting, ensuring accuracy of, loans. And I thought that was the fastest and easiest way to become valuable in the real estate space. So that's why I tackled it and decided to go straight forward with that.
Very cool. Very cool. It's actually funny because that reminded me of part of my story too, is I had started in real estate. I always wanted to be in real estate when I was a teenager. And I bought my first rental when I was 18, a rooming house at Jane and Vint, turned it into a rooming house. And that was in 2007. And then, so that was when I started undergrad. So I went to business undergrad. And then I sold that in my first year of law school. But the reason I went to law school was I always wanted to get into real estate. But I didn't realize, I decided I did not want to become a realtor. So I wanted to get into real estate, but not be a realtor. So I thought I had to have a day job that would allow me to qualify for mortgages, because I knew how important qualifying for mortgages was. That was the hard part. That's what would stop me from buying more rentals. I thought everyone just needed to have a job and you would buy rentals on the side. And that's a great strategy. Probably most of the real estate investors who are listening to this probably do that. You make income from a job. If you can buy a rental a year and add that to your portfolio, you're going to have a very comfortable retirement, right? You do that for 10 years, you're set. For me, it was like, okay, what job can I do that banks are going to lend me a lot of money? Well, banks like lawyers. Mm-hmm. So I went to law school so that I could qualify for mortgages. The worst reason to become a lawyer ever. I went to law school. I got an MBA. I did an undergrad in business before that. So I did 8 years of university and a year of articling. Got licensed as a lawyer, and then went, wait a minute, I can flip houses instead. Yeah. I didn't realize it was a career path. It was an option. And I quit real estate. I quit law to flip houses full time, because that was going to be my full time job. And now I make money in my active business of flipping, and I buy rentals on the side. And that's how we've met through Andre Rivard. He's our director of commercial investments in my company. And, he's the one who, I guess, had met you, and you've come on and you've helped us refinance some of our multifamily properties in my portfolio. And that's how we've met. So I just thought that was similar. You decided, hey, mortgages are hard. I'm going to go the part where I can help people get mortgages by becoming a mortgage agent. My was, mortgages are hard. I'm going to become a lawyer so I can borrow money easier.
100%. And it's funny because it's so, the crazy thing about real estate is just like how many different people get to the end goal, which is buying real estate. And the one thing I've learned doing this mortgage agent role is that you think that's the way, and then you realize half these people are out here doing creative financing deals and never touching a bank. Like the bigger people that I work with are all doing this, starting with private financing and figuring out ways around that, because no matter what, and obviously, like you said, scaling, the slow way of using every single bit of qualification you can absolutely works. But if you want to scale a portfolio, at some point, you got to get away from the banks, because the banks are going to limit you at every single turn.
I will say for the audience, though, for the listeners, you're probably in a unique position where you attract and are attracted to those people who do the creative deals, because I would argue that's actually a very small sliver of people who are both willing and able to put the effort in to do the creative deals. It just so happens that those people, and those are the people you work with. So you get kind of a unique perspective there. I would not say that's normal, though, because most people, I mean, it's funny, even as, my wholesale business, it's not normal for people to like buying from wholesalers is not normal. The majority of investment properties in Toronto trade on the MLS. Most of those buyers have never heard of what a wholesaler is. It's people who are buying a triplex for $3 million, and they don't cash flow, and that's the normal real estate in Toronto.
And that blows my mind then, because I guess a little bit about me is we are definitely like on the boutique brokerage side of things when it comes to handling solutions, and we're a solutions driven kind of mortgage agent. So that is very, very true. I mean, we do res, and I would definitely say probably 90% of my clients like that. So I'm pretty exposed to the niche. So yeah, just 100%. My mom doesn't have rental properties. She would be more so like what you're explaining. She definitely went the bank route. She bought a property, bought it well. It's in Chatham, so it's a little bit easier to qualify, obviously. But yeah, I guess it just depends on what your goal is, because like you said, definitely the average Canadian wants one or two properties and not the headache of scaling a portfolio to 100 units. Like that is definitely the niche that I'm in. But I think, there's still a benefit to understanding how that works sometimes, because I feel like the main thing when I honestly blow people's mind all the time, I'll have calls and I forget the things that I'm saying out of my mouth sometimes are things that people, like you said, have never ever heard. And so, those are the cool conversations I like having, because it's like you've literally changed someone's mindset, someone that's never known what the heck you're talking about, and they're like, this is possible. So I think it's really cool to also be exposed to those type of investors, because I think, most people are limited by themselves and their abilities, like that they know in their perspective. It's not their fault.
They know it's so important, because 100%. We don't, you hear that, you don't know what you don't know. That's so true. I went to law school because I didn't know flipping houses full-time was an option. I also just limited mindset. I thought it wasn't possible to do in Canada. I'm like, no, nobody sells below market value. Nobody would do that. Everyone sells on the MLS. Mindset was off. I didn't know what I didn't know. And in part because there wasn't like networking events, and there wasn't, when I started in 2007, I don't think most of these things were around. Maybe Rain was around, but, I was 18-year-old kid anyways. I wasn't going to these events or learning any of this. I was going to school and, working on my property myself on the side. So, yeah.
And 100%, the you don't know what you don't know really reminds me of, I remember when I first got into the mortgage industry, and I was trying to, because you hear like, set goals. I'm not a goal believer. Like, I'm a vision board driver. I'm not a set hard metric goals. But I remember sitting down and I was paralyzed, because I'm like, from the real estate side, it's like plan everything out. So I'm like, okay, I'm planning everything out. Then I get into the mortgage world. I'm like, how the heck am I supposed to set goals for myself when I don't even know what I don't know? Like, I was literally learning mortgages, and I'm like, oh, I got to hit this number. I got to do this, and this. And I think, what you need to embrace the limiting beliefs you have, and that the idea that you can destroy those. So like, that is literally it. If you can understand you do have limiting beliefs, and then you're open to figuring out better beliefs or being able to replace those with something more solid. I hope that's what we can do for somebody today listening, is that they, pick one piece out of this, that creative financing might help them over the hump, or the bank has told them no. I feel like there's a lot you can learn just by, being exposed to different things you've never been exposed to. So.
Absolutely. Now, talking before, you mainly specialize in, commercial and multifamily properties. You deal with CMHC a lot. So that's a lot of your business as a mortgage agent. Something I wanted to mention too is, people complain that like their realtors aren't trained enough, that it's too easy to become a realtor and there's too many of them.
Yeah.
It's significantly easier to become a mortgage agent.
Yeah, 100%.
There's a very low barrier to entry. So anyone, like, I wrote my mortgage agent license 2 days after I registered for it and passed. It was very simple. I don't broker deals, but I did it for different purposes. But it was very easy to pass. So I just want to put out there, like, just because someone has their mortgage agent license doesn't mean they're going to be able to best represent you. And so if you're looking for someone who specializes in a certain area, work with someone who does that and they know what they're doing and they have a track record and experience, because clearly they've been able to do it before. So obviously Nicholas has done deals for me. I know he's been able to, and we've been able to get those deals funded and receive money. So obviously it worked. Obviously, you knew what you were doing. But I just want to put it out there. Like, there is a low barrier to entry to becoming a mortgage agent. It used to be the same for a realtor. My dad was a realtor in the 60s. And it was one weekend class.
Yeah. And that's the mortgage agent class today in 2020. It's like 2024. It's funny because when I tried to decide, very much like you, I looked at both and I was like, the only thing that drove me away from sales in real estate, like actually being a realtor, was the driving. That was literally the one thing. When I sat down and I was like, what do I want to do with my life? I love real estate investing. Which active business can I go after? Was very much how much time wasted would happen. And what could I do as a mortgage agent process-wise to ensure? And the crazy thing is, like, for the amount of deals and the amount of clients I have, literally I've met probably 8 of them, and none of them have ever signed in person. I don't even accept physical docs. Like, it is usually a Zoom meeting, but I've met in person probably 8 of my clients. And it's a wild thing because, DocuSign has changed it for everybody, which has made it really efficient to be a mortgage agent. And it scared me to think about how much you drive. And honestly, it's because how much time I wasted for my real estate agent between looking and going through 25 houses while I was trying to learn what I wanted to do, because I was always actively looking for the next one. But it's like, I thought about that and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to sit at a desk, be highly efficient, and figure out the niche I want to tackle and just do it. And
where are you based? Where do you live?
So now I'm in Cambridge. So I lived in Chatham, Windsor, and then basically after university, I went up to Cambridge when I decided to do mortgages. So it was like,
but you do mortgages across Ontario. It doesn't matter where you are.
Canada. So we've got clients out east, clients out west. The beautiful thing is, so we're part of DLC National. So basically DLC National is a brokerage under DLC, the umbrella. And so basically they have all of the province or provincial licenses. So we get to be able to utilize those as being under DLC National. So it's pretty cool. So I've had clients that started in Ontario and realized in the last couple of years, it's extremely expensive. The LTB is getting worse and worse and worse and not protecting them here. And especially with MLI, like CMHC MLI, you can go execute that over in Calgary and Edmonton with affordable units way faster than you can here. And it's a 30 to 60 day notice that rent's going up. And I've seen massive deals transition in those parts of the market that, I still heavily believe in Ontario. And I think all the growth is here. I think that Western market has, had its booms and busts over and over. And I think a lot of people forget about that. But we can grow with people that want to go take a risk over there. And, we have industry partners, we have the appraisers, the lawyers, we have the real estate agents over there already from the amount of volume we do. So it's cool. It's cool to be able to not have to say no or pass them to someone else, grow with them. We learn more. The client learns more. It's it's a network effect. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. So it's pretty awesome.
And since CMHC is national, the programs they put are national. They're not specific to provinces. So it's going to be much harder to hit certain targets like in Toronto to be able to borrow, at certain leverage. You're not going to get all the benefits of the program in more expensive markets, but you may be able to go to markets like you were saying, in Alberta, that you may then be able to hit some of the benefits of the, MLI Select, for example, which we can get back to. But you mentioned a condo flip, and I wanted to dig into that first. So you did a condo flip. Yeah. Where was this property?
So my first ever real estate investment property was a condo flip in Chatham. So it was in Chatham. It was a old 1970s building. My mom is a real estate investor too. She's got a couple of properties. So she had a condo on the first floor. So I was already familiar with the building. And then basically there was an opportunity to purchase this one, and ended up picking it up for 82,000, which was a steal at that time. Like at that time, that was still good. I think they were trading around like 130. So basically that is why I got my position. I was able to actually qualify for a Libro mortgage. And yeah, so that was my first pickup, and it was just a full gut from the like inside out. And, you know, I was in the mindset of everybody I followed, and YouTube and everything was like, do it yourself. So it was awesome because it was literally 9 to 5 I'd work, and then I would literally be in there from 5 to like 9:30, 10:30 doing like just YouTube and my phone, and like sitting there just doing this. And originally, to be honest, it wasn't going to be an investment property at first. I just wanted to make a really nice condo for myself and get out of my parents. And then about 6 months, or about like probably 60% of the way through the renovation, I decided, you know, I don't want to get out of my parents' house because it literally costs too much to live alone. So I ended up saying, you know, I'm just going to continue finishing it the way I wanted, but it's going to be a rental. And it was pretty good. Like it was a lot of work. And it's funny, I actually just had a memory pop up on Google Photos the other day of me walking through it finished. And like, I was just smiling like an idiot at my phone, because I was like, that was the hardest thing I did at that point in time. Like, and nobody understood why I was sitting there till 9:30. Like, and my dad was the classic, like, it's just a rental. Like, you don't need to do all this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm sitting there changing every reciprocal and adding new faceplates to everything. And he's like, that's such a waste of money. I'm like, Dad, it's like $70. Like, these are the things that are literally going to change the product from someone else. And it was, yeah, I loved it. It was honestly amazing. It was a good opportunity, and made out like a bandit on the exit. So,
yeah. So what did you, well, first of all, I love that, you know, working on it, because I think you learned so much. Like, I don't believe people, you know, unless that's your specialty, should be doing all the DIY yourselves. But
no,
to do it at the beginning to learn, I mean, I'm glad I worked on my own properties. I worked for a contractor in construction. I learned so much about construction. Now I manage so many construction projects. It's been very helpful. So I think it's really good you've gone through that. I'm surprised you didn't have like neighbor complaints working into the night, because
so I had no clue. No, I had no clue you needed like permits. Like, this was like real. I didn't know you needed any of this stuff. And I remember the one night, finally, a neighbor actually I was taking up the tile, and it was 10:30, and I had a massive rented like shovel scoop like tile remover. And this girl came and started beating on the door, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I don't know. She's like, "You can't be doing that at 9:30." So then I cut it off at 8:30 from then on. But yeah, I was just, you know, it's good. I think it's really good to just go. Like, I've always been like, you know, that ready, fire, aim. And like, yeah, I think that's the way to do it, because you're so blissfully like ignorant to like everything that it just gets done. And, you know, that was that project. That was literally like, I'm just going to YouTube, figure it out, not ask anybody any questions. I figured it all out myself and made tons of mistakes. And, you know, doing the first couple or even first one, like I would say, just like you said, it allows you to familiarize yourself getting used to things going wrong. Because if not, you would be a person that when you get to, you know, you have the team in place, something goes wrong, it's the end of the world. Like, it was an amazing bed to learn everything that I had to on the interior parts of the unit. Obviously, that project was a much different project than we're doing now. But it was awesome, man. Like, learned how to tile, install the toilets, like vanity, shower, like had a huge steel tub, put it into a beautiful, nice rectangular tub. Like, these things that my dad was there with me at night figuring out. It was a good bonding experience. It was super fun. I'll never do it again for sure. I will pay the labor this time. But I think, yeah, everybody should go through the gauntlet once, figure it out, and then you know what to look for when you hire contractors in the future. Like, it allows you to be able to vet people and, you know, product quality and quality work. I think everybody should go through it.
So you paid $82,000. How much did the rentals cost you?
Because I had no money at that time, because I sunk it all into the down payment, I had a $15,000 Home Depot credit card. So I maxed that baby out, and that is basically all I spent. I didn't spend much more than what was on the credit card. I think the only thing aside from that was appliances. I went to like Appliance Source or something like that, but I basically maxed that out. I think it was right around like $15K for everything. Okay. That was everything. And we didn't take drywall down, but it was like patch and all that stuff. And then tile, brand new bathrooms, brand new kitchen. We took down it had like the old split wall. So we took down the wall to a half wall and make it more entertaining.
Yeah. And you saved everything in labor, which is, I mean, if you don't value your time, which when you're you don't, but labor is really expensive in construction. So you saved a shit ton of money that way. And what do you sell this for?
that sold for 216. So yeah, it was pretty good. So what actually ended up happening, because in that point in time, I had a job that kind of went remote. I ended up, because like I said, I switched from wanting to live there to doing it as a rental. So I had the renters for about 7 months, and then I just told them that I plan on selling. They ended up saying, no, that's okay. Like, we'll go find a new place as long as you give us some time. So they actually allowed me to sell it vacant. They were great people. And then I moved to come do mortgages up in Cambridge. So yeah, it all worked out. I didn't intend really on it being a flip, ended up being a flip. And it was awesome. Honestly, it gave me the cushion that allowed me to go all in on mortgages. So I'm always thankful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, and you probably made close to 100 grand, between 80 and 100 all in, after realtor commissions and closing costs and the financing in the meantime, but you rented it as well. And, and you held it both long enough and rented it with the intention. Now, the way the rules changed, intention doesn't matter anymore, but, depending on how long you owned it, either way at the time, it was a capital gain, not full income like a flip would have been.
So technically, so actually, yeah. So there was a workaround that I got because I was doing remote work for Tepperman's. My accountant ended up getting a letter basically that stated I had to move away from that position for traveling because I was an internal auditor. So I actually got away with, there's like an exception that
your primary, because you lived there for a bit, then you rented it because you had to move.
Yes, you travel for work.
So
it was a workaround. It wasn't normal. I should have paid capital gains, but yeah, no.
But if you meet the criteria for it, and you're not, if it's not a lie, if you meet the criteria, then you fit into that criteria, and so it can be your primary residence, and that's tax free. That's awesome. Let's move on to your commercial stuff and what you see as opportunities in the commercial space. Particularly as it relates to being able to get financing on stuff. What are the opportunities in commercial space right now that you see?
Sure. So honestly, this is more of my personal opinion. It is really commercial conversion projects. So it's one that I'm personally taking down right now with a partner that was a client first. But the reason I'm so passionate about telling people about this is CMHC has they really love intensification of areas. And, when you're in tertiary markets, there's not many products out there from the banks anymore. They're all reducing LTVs and everything like that. So it's getting more challenging to do that. And so, 2 years ago, we could have someone buy private and finish the project, go to CMHC. That's no more, right? So now we have introduced the bridge. So basically at this point, you need to buy with an NHA approved lender, have the funds if you want to move in, 12 months stabilization, then you can get your new value. If you're with a private, if you buy private and you try to switch into CMHC, nope, you got to refinance 24 months and then you can go to CMHC. So they're stopping this, rightfully so. Like, their job is to technically affordable homes. It sucks. But there were so many values coming back.
I don't know that I understand the rightfully so. I don't agree with that. I'm not sure why having bought it.
I think it's definitely... No, I think it's terrible for sure. But I think that at the end of the day, when you look at what CMHC's overall guidelines are for, is to build affordable housing. And I'm on the investor side. Like, I get it. And my clients are investors.
No, I just don't understand why it helps, because what if I build affordable properties with private money? Now I can't refi directly with CMHC. That's why it doesn't make sense to me.
100%. So the hard part is affordable homes. The metrics that they use are obviously lower than actual affordable homes in the area. The hard part is that most people aren't as great as you, and most people are doing it to max out the value, energy efficiency as well. And so therefore they're just trying to max out their NOI. And most people are doing that. So that is the issue that they're trying to stop, or most people were taking advantage of it, building, the thing is, when you look at CMHC, you got to understand that the product is there, not for the people doing 8-plexes, 12-plexes, maybe the guys at 24 now on their radar. It is for the big builders. Like, it is a construction product to keep big units, 300 units, like that sort of thing. So they abuse the hell out of it. And that's what ruined it for the smaller guys, is because when you're in this mid-tier, you're a reflection of the bigger guys that are creating these products. And what they were doing is creating 300 square foot micro units, marking them all affordable. Meanwhile, they actually had bachelor units that were 500, 600, like whatever, obviously a little exaggerated, but they abuse the system, and then these come in place. So, it affects, the worst part is it affects my clients, the mid-tier clients, before, you know, the big REITs and stuff like that, because they rely on this. And honestly, right now, the real challenge is a lot of these people in the last year have done these projects before this rule, because this rule was September. So all of a sudden you were planning on a 12-month holding of 10 to 12% debt, and now you're 24 months. Like, that could actually bankrupt you. Like, that is something you probably didn't plan for. And also, you probably promised investors money back, which now is not going to happen. And if you can't even budget properly to support the building's increased debt, you're also in trouble. So, you know, it sucks. And I think everything's subject to change. I understand why CMHC did it. It absolutely sucks. And I hate it, because the client side makes my life hell. And it makes it way harder to explain to somebody, especially when, you know, I've done bridge products. So like, the problem is I have to go back to clients and explain to them that, you know, this is something we could have never seen happen. It's like, it was effective immediately. They didn't even grandfather it in. It was effective immediately. No. So, you know, that came from a mass amount of different things. You had a flipped upside down book, like MLI versus standard. MLI was never supposed to be the CMHC financing number one. It was supposed to be a supportive product. It ended up flipping the book completely. More people went MLI than standard. They abused the hell out of it. And then all of a sudden, you know, they get audited. Conversations start that, you know, you might be a little underwater, allegedly, because all of your LTVs were 95%. Cap rates ended up rising. And then all of a sudden now everything's underwater. So, you know, they had to pivot it. It makes sense. It sucks because they honestly take more premiums on the standard version than MLI. But yeah, overall, I would say, and get back to the original question of what is in my eyes the most, and that's why that's not, you know, something I would recommend for an average investor to try and do anymore. Commercial conversions are different, because the thing with new construction with CMHC is that if you have a change of use, so you're taking it from pure commercial to residential, technically it can be considered new construction, which then means those rules are out the window. So on our project, that's what we're doing. Because we're switching it to majority residential, and it had a unit in the back that was, it wasn't marked down as residential, but someone was living there. We're adding 11 residential units to this 8-unit commercial we purchased. And that's allowing us right away to go new construction, but we bought it privately. So we structured it really well on the buy. And I think that's where the new opportunity is. If you want to be ahead of the game and be the one that got to abuse the system a bit, it is being able to do the conversion projects, because you get units that aren't subject to rental change or rental increase like rules. Yeah. You don't deal with the LTB, so you don't have to worry about tenants that are in that building. You don't have to cash for keys anybody. What I look for specifically is month-to-month commercial tenants. That way I can just give them, you know, the 30, 60-day notice. And that allowed us to get our building basically vacant, even though there was 4 tenants in there when we closed. So if you can create those criteria where it's, you want a building that's nearly vacant or month to month, you want a building, which I would say a lesson learned on ours, which we'll get into it more after, is maybe, you know, metal trusses and concrete floors, messing around with buildings that are, you know, wood. And then sometimes you'll have like cinder block and you'll have brick, and it's just like a lot of different materials go into these buildings. I'm going through it right now. It's costly to get everything lined up and make sure everything's good to go. But overall, you're going to have the easiest financing experience. If you can close it with private financing, you can do your takeout numbers right away, loan to cost, because you're going out of a construction mortgage, and we can get you into CMHC. And if you want to set and forget a building, CMHC is the financing you want to be in. So I think there's a lot of potential in that. And I think, you know, you can't disregard the rental increases. It's another tool that you get to use to potentially get a tenant out that's troubled. It's not obviously going to guarantee you they get out, but it does give you that extra little bit that it's like, hey, I've increased the rent, tenant can't do it. Like, this is something I can go to the LTB with. And that's honestly, I'm not like pro kick people out. I'm just saying it does help.
No, but sometimes with how like the LTB is so messed up right now that you need every tool in your toolbox to possibly, you know, help, because it takes so long to get a hearing. They're so freely, you know, they'll so freely adjourn or kick back or deny a hearing for like a small technical error that even paralegals and lawyers make in its paperwork, like, because some of the stuff's complicated, and if they decide, oh, you know what, it was a gray area, but I decided you did it wrong. Now you're like, oh, I need a new hearing. And I've seen hearings, we've had some of our hearings adjourned and rescheduled a year later. So you're waiting, you know, 6-9 months for the hearing in the first place, and then it takes another year to get your second hearing. And this could be a tenant not paying, or a tenant selling drugs in your building and causing all kinds of problems. And it is very, very frustrating. So having that tool in your toolbox. Now, I would say my only concern with that is it's very nice to have right now. But my concern is that, going the way of the dodo in the same way as MLI or CMHC changed their rules and said effective immediately. Rules were changed in 2017. The Wynne government provincially had, I believe, a 16-point plan for tenant protection, something like that. And before that point, there was no rent control for anything built after something like 1992. So she canceled that and got rid of that, no lack of rent control for the newer units. And then when Ford came into power, he made that rule again and basically said, as of now, November 2018, we now, there's no rent control on new units.
Yeah.
The big problem is my thing is, I believe that is helpful in building new units and making people build new units. I believe him not having made it retroactive to where it was before really caused the problem, like basically made it not effective. Because if you go, oh, great, I'm going to have no rent control for a few years, and then the Liberals come back into power, NDP does, and we lose it again, and then we never bring it back fully, then we're screwed. Because why would I build more houses? Like by the time I'm starting a new building and it's finished, could be a change in the provincial government and I lose this lack of rent control on my new build. So if he had made it retroactive to prior, then there would have been that confidence again. Okay, cool. We'll build this. Possibly another government comes into power. We lose, no rent control on the new build for a few years, 4 years, 8 years, whatever. But then the Conservatives come back, they put it back in place and they make it retroactive. So now I can raise rents again on my building built 8 years ago. But that's not what happened. So I feel like you lose that power. And again, the nice thing is what you're saying, no rent control. The way they remade the rules, they added some clarity that the old rules from the 90s didn't have, which was basically it needs to never have been occupied as a residential unit. So, one of the projects, I believe you helped us with the financing on it, was we converted a 12-unit building to a 17-unit building. And all of the units were in the same building envelope. So we were dividing up internal units, making 2 bedrooms into 1 bedrooms, joining two bedroom units into a 2 bedroom and 2 1 bedrooms, etc. Because the overall rent is much higher on that. But those are all subject to rent control. None of those are exempt from rent control because they were all existing residential units. So if we had added an addition, fully new addition, and put new units in that, no rent control on those. But there's rent control on our newly renovated or newly existed units because they were in a space that was residential. So I do love what you're saying, commercial conversions. It was never residential. So they're like new residential units, not subject to rent control. That is a very good tool. Absolutely.
The one challenge too that I do want to point out, obviously, because people are still getting away with, at the end of the day, if you can get a vacant building and reposition that vacant building, you can probably afford to go into a bridge and do that and do it properly. The other benefit to doing, renovating pre-existing units is you're not going to be subject to the Ontario Builders Code. So there's a lot of great things that come in that as well, because you don't have to go install HRVs into every system. The problem with doing the commercial conversions is, there's still the downside that our costs are a little bit higher because we do have to now put Ontario Builder Code minimums. And then if you want to do CMHC, you got to do energy efficiency 40 plus better. So there's definitely downsides to both. I think what outweighs it is it's a quicker exit. I think it's just the fact that you can finish and refi right away. And honestly, on ours, we've looked at both because our numbers. So basically, I'll just go over the numbers real quick. Is we purchased the building for $700 and it was an 8-unit commercial. So basically, right now we're at the point that our budget that we submitted and everything is about 1.2, and that's with HST.
1.2 in Reno only.
Yeah, and that's to add. Yeah, that's renos only. So that's to add 11 residential units, cut down the units we had at the commercial. So the general layout of that building.
Any commercial units?
Yeah, so we're leaving the commercial units that are there. So because Chatham's down to, we're right on King Street in Chatham. So the main hub of Chatham, we're right downtown. And so they were very flexible, an amazing city to deal with. We got a bunch of rebates and things like that. But the thing that they're sticklers on is you must maintain your commercial space in the front. So the one thing that was difficult with that project was we had to get 4 bachelor units in the back of the first floor. And because the river runs through Chatham, you're then exposed to the Thames like Grove Society. So we had to go to them to get minor variance through them to check the elevation. Super stupid because, you know, they had 2019 data for the elevation and they go, no, we need to check that this hasn't sunk. And I'm like, in my head, I'm saying, if the building has sunk more than 15 centimeters in the last 5 years, we have bigger problems, like way bigger problems. But no, they rinsed us $7,500 to go get an elevation study. So, you know, there's some challenges with that building, but the great thing about doing that is that now we have 4 bachelors on the back. So we get a spread of unit mix. We have 4 bachelors on the back, and then upstairs we have another 7 units. And then we still have our 3 commercial units. But what was important is we knew right away that commercial would be the hardest units to fill. It's always the hardest units to fill. That's why we cut it down to like 30% of what it was. And basically, so that 1.2 covers all of that. And then shell commercial units, we're delivering shells so they can do it. But the exterior is getting a huge upgrade. We facelift. It's like the typical, you know, you have those showcases when you walk into the front commercial. So we destroyed all those. We're putting flush glass, stucco, so it adds to our insulation value as well and waterproofs the building. So a lot of big changes to the structure as well. And it's all in that 1.2, which came down to my partner, who I met as a client originally. He's a master electrician. So on this one, because it was a little different, we both said, you know, we're not going to take fees. We're going to reinvest this one. We want to get it done, get it under the belt, take all the profit out, and we're going to recycle it again. So it really helps. He's the ground player. I'm the one that does everything from the outside. I visit a lot. We make decisions together, but it was very much like I'll kind of handle all the communication this side. You handle the on ground and making sure people are there and doing that. And, you know, our after numbers, the great thing about these kind of projects is you get an appraisal with your as complete value. So we know at the end of this project, before we made these changes, our as complete was 2.945. And that was with pretty conservative, it was like 6.5 cap. Like, I think it was a 6 cap blended. But the cool thing is since that number, so that's our guiding number, we know that now we've added more space to the commercial by doing the front. So the cool thing is we made this decision. We either bridge it and we're going to be a loss of about 40 grand per year in that bridge at 10%, or we go direct to CMHC. And basically we just asked what's more important. We're getting close to 200 grand in rebates from the city of Chatham already. 130 of that is for adding units, and then we get 230, and then we get 100 grand basically off our property tax. We get 5 years of property tax forgiveness, 100%. So there's some benefits that we weighed out, and we said, okay, what would we rather do? Would we rather do loan to cost and be able to pull out the majority of our project and in terms of what it is, and at that point we can make sure that makes sense, or do we pull out 600, put it into an over leveraged position that we can get the next one?
Are you a savvy real estate investor looking to maximize your profits? Well, if you're buying properties off the MLS, you're not making as much as you could. The most lucrative way to boost your bottom line is by acquiring investment properties off market. By buying privately off market, you're able to save tens of thousands. Now, the problem is finding off market properties is really hard and takes a lot of time, effort, and money to do. Bliss is your number one source, delivering exclusive deals that you will not find on the MLS directly to your inbox. Bliss's extensive network and insider connections gives you access to properties that are not publicly listed and at a discount. We've helped hundreds of investors across Ontario and BC source the right properties at the right time for their portfolio. Buying assignable purchase contracts through Bliss at a discount helps facilitate higher returns, lower competition, and deals that align perfectly with your investment goals. From start to finish, Bliss's world-class team of real estate professionals makes the process seamless for all investors. If you're ready to elevate your real estate investment strategy, visit us at offmarketbliss.ca to join our buyers list and start receiving exclusive off-market deals directly to your inbox. The most profitable opportunities await, and they're exclusive to you and our valued buyers list members. For your next project, check out Bliss, the go-to source for off-market deals.
We decided that, you know, we wanted to jump into CMHC right away to start cash flowing because we have this 200 grand from the city. Plus we're going to have this building that's not over leveraged. It's going to be cash flow and close to 100 and something instead. We can take that money and conservatively make the next investment. but we understand creative financing. So we don't need all the money that we would have needed if we took the bridge out. That would have been just selfish of us to do, because we literally would have probably spent that money very irresponsibly. So at least this way, it forces us to stay creative on the second one. But now we have this cash flowing asset that's under leveraged that we could also utilize ourselves as collateral. So there's a lot of different things you can do, and we only have that freedom because it's a commercial conversion. You wouldn't get that if you went to buy a building and tried to do that. You don't get to make that decision. You get the decision made for you by CMHC. So there's some freedom.
And CMHC does have rules because CMHC is to finance, the intention is to finance residential properties. So there's only so much commercial you're allowed to have in property at all if it's mixed use. How much are you allowed to have?
So 30%. And so this is something you must watch. So the basic minimums for CMHC financing is 5 residential units, and 30% has to be, that's the cap for commercial percentage on that
square footage of the building, not number of units. Square
no.
footage.
And so this is why it's really hard, because if you look in a downtown core and you're looking at a 2-story building, you can pretty much assume as it stands, it's not going to qualify. Just basically it's 50,
basically 50% residential.
Exactly. Yeah. So what you have to do is figure out if the city is open to you putting in the back units. That's like it instantly disqualifies.
Have strict rules where they're like, nope, the whole main floor needs to remain commercial on our main drag because this is our commercial area. This is what we want. So you absolutely see that. That's good. It's good that you're able to do that. I really like this deal. Obviously, you guys have $1 million built-in equity when you guys are completed this, which is awesome. Can be a full BRRRR. That's awesome. I agree with what you're saying on the commercial, where it's frustrating how strict Ontario building code's gotten. Now, luckily, when you're converting things, I know when you're using existing residential, you have to meet new building code when you're adding units, but it's within a certain. There's certain rules. There's like different levels of building code. There's different parts for like conversions, renovations, and completely new. So I imagine even on a commercial conversion, because the building exists, you have to meet some of the new requirements, but it may be slightly lessened. And just a random example is, I'm not using commercial, but like when you do a basement apartment in an existing house, I believe building code says you need a glass area of your windows of 5% of the space for new. But if you're converting existing, you need 2.5% glass area. So if you have a 100 square foot room, you need 2.5 square feet of glass instead of 5 square feet of glass. So in a basement where you don't have as much, as large windows, that can save you money in terms of not having to do a large window well and dig down and all that stuff. So you will have to meet a lot of new rules. I think the HRV ones are really dumb, especially the way they do them. I think there could be much simpler HRVs that cost a lot less money, because a lot of times we need to put in full-size HRVs for small units, and it's like $3,500. It's crazy.
I've got a hint on this one that even my designer didn't know about the units. They're called Cyclones. So they're a pretty cool unit that you can use. It's a through-the-wall ERV.
I've seen these, and Ottawa wouldn't let me use them.
Really? So that's how we got away with it on our bachelors. So the main decision we had, really, and honestly, the biggest decision we had in this building was HVAC. Surprisingly. And the reason is HRV is complicated for no reason. So, we were like, okay, we can save a bunch of money doing split air conditioners, but then no, you need an HRV. So now we need a ducted HRV. So why don't we go with an actual air handler? And we're like, this makes zero sense. Like, I'm not going to save the money on the split air and then go put an HRV system in, because it's just stupid. They're going to charge us the same. So what we ended up doing was found the Cyclone system, and in Chatham, they did allow us to use it. And it's basically a way easier install. It goes through like a vent, and it literally just has a built-in fan for like $800.
If they allow you to use that, you absolutely should. I think those are by far sufficient for most builds. For listeners who aren't familiar, HRV, heat recovery ventilation system, the idea is that they've increased building codes so much in terms of insulation and the building seal that the buildings no longer have enough air leakage to kind of replace the air inside. So if you're living in there, you're cooking, you're breathing, you're showering, too much humidity can build up and you could have a mold problem in your house because it's so well sealed. And so they installed these HRVs, which are supposed to allow fresh air to come in from outside, but it recaptures some of the heat you have or the cool in the summer if you're using AC, and it transfers that air, switches it with the outside, and you recapture some of that loss of energy. So it's less of an energy loss, and you get fresh air. I mean, in the past, if you had a problem, you'd open a window. That's you lose your heat or your cool. So I get it, but a simple system like that works. what I'm frustrating about is I built a couple coach houses in Ottawa, 420 square feet for one of them, 450 for the other. We have full ducted HRVs in them. They wouldn't let us get away with a different system.
That's nuts. Makes no sense. Those are the annoying rules that make zero sense and piss you off as an investor, because it's like, why are you cutting into my bottom line for something that literally operates the exact same?
Yeah, and all of the additional requirements, now new units, everything's, interconnected smoke, hardwired smoke alarms and with strobe lights, CO detectors, and the insulation now, not only do you insulate in the joist cavities, right? And it's increased, it used to be R12 requirements. Now I believe it's R22, R20 or R22 upgrades. And then on top of that, you need to insulate on the outside of the buildings, or you have to basically do a thermal bridge on your studs, because they're basically saying, oh, your wood studs, well, cold can get transfer through the wood, even though it was fine for, hundreds of years in Canada, but cold can transfer through the wood. So now you need to do rigid foam. Well, that's how we get away with do the thermal break. We use rigid foam on the outside of this. So now you have foam and then your studs and your insulation between the studs. It's crazy. And they're complaining that there's not enough housing, but at the same time, they've made it so expensive to build housing. I'm not saying these aren't better, but the post-war homes, the 1.5 stories, the bungalows that they were building in, the 50s and 60s, they were knocking those up. They're small homes. Now with all these new requirements they've built, it often makes sense to just build a larger home, because you have all these setup costs for all of these things. So you just build a much larger home, and we're no longer building these small, cheap homes. And then people can't afford housing. I don't understand these rules. It's very frustrating. I'm going on a rant.
I don't understand the law like the government does. I think it's very, short-sighted. Even though they're paid to understand the impacts, it's really surprising when you read headlines. Sometimes it's like, my kid, my nephew could have understood that there might be, you introduce more people, housing is going to skyrocket. It's a pretty simple formula. And, I just actually read like the CMHC thing saying, CMHC report basically saying that 2026 is probably going to outpace 2022. And it's like, yeah, I wonder why, we let 1 million people in the country. And it's like, well, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it's going to, like, if we thought bad right now, honestly, this is my personal opinion, I think 2026 is going to be way harder for inflation. I think once this happens, it's going to outpace everything at that point. They're going to try and cut to make up for it, to drive demand, to maybe build more houses. I think we're going to just end up seeing another cycle like real soon, instead of the 10-year typical wait that we'd have between cycles. I hope not. But, it seems like these things they're putting in place in the last 2 years, and we can't forget that COVID was an absolute left field ball. We had no clue about it. They're doing their best to figure this out after reeling back from something that shut the world down. Do I think they're doing it right? No, not at all. Not even close.
I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't, always try to predict stuff. I do think the real estate market's going to come back, but I think the economy is going to continue hurting, and for a while. And part of that is, we have such a decreased efficiency of labor in Canada, and businesses, like the CRA continues introducing new things. Accountants don't have the capacity to keep up with it. So there's such an accounting burden. Basically all business owners are spending a significant portion on their time dealing with CRA bullshit. And it's so unnecessary, and it stops productivity in Canada. If they simplified stuff, literally simplified accounting and CRA rules, businesses would be more efficient. But instead, you have a small business, you almost need an in-house accountant. There's not enough accountants to go around. It's very frustrating.
It's a very, very good example. Was it that trust rule that they had that they ended up scrapping after spending
the day up?
It's like our stress doesn't matter. It's crazy. It is,
and they put in tons of punishments if you don't do it. And now I know we've gone a little long before we get to the next segment, but before that, I did want to talk more about the MLI Select program. So tell me a bit about how the MLI Select program works.
Yeah. So the MLI Select program is I think it was introduced in 2020 around then. It was a new program added. They had a similar program to it to give you points, but they made it very simple to understand this time around. So basically, the MLI product revolves around affordability, energy efficiency, and basically the accessibility of the building. And so those three pillars drive points in which allow you to qualify for different debt levels, different amortizations, and cheaper premiums. So, and premiums are just the insurance premium that's added. Just like if you've only ever purchased, let's say, a single family home and you put less than 20% down, there's insurance premiums you pay. So MLI has a cheaper insurance premium that changes with a wide variety of things. The main driver of this is new construction versus pre-existing. So that is basically where the point difference is going to come from. And each one has different point systems. Typically, like when we take a look at it, it's going to be very similar in terms of the numbers, but your points are different. So on new construction, you're always going to hit 95% loan to value. So 95% loan to value or loan to cost. It's construction, so it's probably going to be loan to cost. And so the point structure is basically 50, 70, and 100 points. And to get those points, then you go through, if you have affordability, if you have energy efficiency, if you have accessibility, it's a couple different points.
And some of those categories, you can get enough points only in one of those categories, right? Like
100%. So in some of them, so accessibility is the only one that you actually can't get pure 100 points from. So that one only goes up to 30 points. And accessibility, I think it's a lot easier when you're doing new construction, because, as you're looking at bigger buildings, it can be really expensive to change your heating systems, the encapsulation of the building to get 100% of the points from just going on energy efficiency. So some people will design universal units for the building and hit those accessibility because it's a bonus 20 points or 30 points, and you can add that to level 2. So the thing that's really different that is, the whole thing with this is everybody takes energy efficiency because in pre-existing, you just have to reduce what is from your baseline, which means, your building right now has an old boiler system. You're going to split air ducts. It's being more energy efficient. You're cutting out gas if you go 100% electric. So they're going to make a model.
And unfortunately, I don't necessarily think cutting out gas is the best idea, but the government wants you to cut out gas. Part of this is reducing carbon emissions. So they're trying to force you to go electric. And with heat pumps, it can be a good idea a bit. Yeah. But, if I'm on an efficient boiler, I'd rather stay on the efficient boiler. In my opinion, not usually worth the difference, even the benefit of MLI Select. But
we did it on our building and purely because it was easy to get the points, but also because, plus hydro is something that people are used to. And so that's what we decided when we did our building is we could basically pass off a big utility. And this is kind of part of this conversation where when I'm suggesting MLI to buildings and property owners, I usually tell them to go for energy efficiency. And the reason is if you go for affordability, you're going to tank your own NOI. And that's going to basically reflect a lower value. And so it's the simplest one to say, okay, I need to go to my contractor and I need to get him to get me a quote for this kind of system. And I need to get a quote for this kind of system. And if it makes sense, your value gets to be maximized because now you can achieve the highest rents and you're not sacrificing any NOI. So all you got to figure out is the delta between the loan I'm going to get going energy efficiency versus the cost of going into that. Does it make sense? And also, does it make sense for 5 years down the road when I have higher rents and I want to refi? So the majority of people do energy efficiency here in Ontario. Completely different conversation out west in Alberta and Calgary. They go affordability most of the times. Here it depends on where you are, but let's use Chatham for example. The rent that you can use, it's the median rent. So 30% of the median rent is $1,037, so $1,037 basically a month. Out in Calgary and Alberta, everybody's making more money out there. It's I think around $1,600. So
I believe it's 30% of the median renter income, I believe, right?
That's determined by CMHC, yeah.
That's determined by CMHC. So median renter income. So because incomes are higher in Alberta, you can charge $1,600 in rent, still call it affordable, and now you're meeting CMHC criteria. And I believe you have to basically commit to keeping it
10 years
for 10 years at the 30%, which doesn't mean $1,600 now. If incomes go up, you would go up. So Chatham is $1,037. So there's opportunities in this, and I'll mention a few that I've seen. Is one, if you are going to do small units anyways, as you mentioned, some big, possibly big builders going to 300 square foot units, depending on where they are. So, one of my buildings is in Belleville. We were looking at, well, what would we be hitting for affordability? It was around $1,200 in rent. So if we had smaller or older units we didn't want to renovate, and we could basically decide, hey, you know what, we're not going to renovate a portion of our units. We're going to keep them as is. And the rents for those are around $1,200 or under in that market possibly. We can hit that. I believe it's 40. I believe for that one, we were looking at 40% of our units being considered affordable. So that was something we considered doing. Now you're saying, in because of both the higher incomes and with the lower building prices out, in Alberta and things like that, you can hit those off the bat without actually charging less than market rents.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities there, even in Ontario.
Yeah, sorry. With vacant units. So like what a lot of people are doing out there is they're buying new builds from builders and they're going in and we can submit a rent roll. So like you don't actually, the important thing with all this is CMHC is the insurer. So basically what we do is we go to get a COI. So it's an approval for a certificate of insurance. So all we submit to them is the rent roll. And so when you have locked in units, it's very easy to submit a rent roll and say, this is what it is. And a lot of people out there are just submitting the rent roll at affordability metric, filling up the other units. It's called a sixplex. And then they end up being able to go right away in without the leases in place right away. They get the leases by the time we get the certificate and go to a bank. But there's a big period there where you can hold on to the certificate, lease them out, and that's it. So it's really interesting because out there is a completely different ball game, different market, but it's funny how there's right away people figure out affordability, energy efficiency over here. Like we really figure out what works pretty quickly. And CMHC is it's a really hard, I think a big thing is that people think it's easy. It's a really hard thing to get qualified for. But if you can qualify for it, I think you can lock into it and you're good to go for, in a building for a very long time. One thing I did want to touch on was the square footage. So a big change that a lot of people on like what you said with the affordability. One thing I want everybody to understand is right now, CMHC is really being a stickler on square footages. So for affordability, it's actually going to be a cost per square foot. So, and like I said at the beginning of this, the reason that happened is because all these big builders were doing micro units and they realized, nope, we got to change this. So back in September, they did change that to the fact that, and it only really hurts us because, 6 to 12 units, 24 units, if you're trying to deem a bachelor, let's say let's say you have a bachelor unit that's 350, 400 square feet, and that's $1,000, but then you have a 2-bed that's 1,500 and it's 900 square feet. If you break down the square footages, your 2-bed's going to be cheaper per square foot. So then therefore they're going to lock that unit. They're not going to allow you to do the bachelor. So it really does mess up the underwriting. And I've seen a lot of information go out. And I think that's a big change that people need to realize when they're underwriting these now is they are going to just take the cheapest square foot. So dollar per square foot.
Well, good that we have you, because what I said about, just using bachelors, it sounds like it doesn't necessarily apply anymore, just using small units. Part of this is trying to understand where the opportunities are in the rules. Accessibility, for example, I was looking at possibly building some 6 or 8 units in Ottawa at the time. I'm not sure if this is a building code rule or if it was an Ottawa specific rule, but they required, I believe for an 8 unit, X number of units to be accessible. This wasn't related to CMHC at all. So you're already possibly creating some accessible units as a requirement when you're building new anyways. So you may be able to just increase the number of that, get some of those points, get a few points, and that's not necessarily about hitting, you don't necessarily need to hit the 100 points in the program to have it worthwhile. One of the things I wanted to mention too is you talked about being able to go to 95% loan to value. For listeners, that might be possible in some markets at some price points, but you also have to hit certain debt coverage ratio rules. Yeah. One of the nice things about MLI Select is it brings down, depending on the points you're at, I believe they were looking at regular CMHC was something like a 1.3 debt coverage ratio, and MLI Select bring it down to 1.1, right? Is that?
So what happens on the standard program is it depends on your term, basically. So if you take a 5-year term, it's 1.3 and it's 1.2 if it's a 10-year term. And the benefit of MLI is you get either term at 1.1. So it does help you qualify for more debt. But just as you said, like we still need to fully underwrite the deal because the issue with this is, yes, up to, and everybody sells the 95%. It is up to 95%. On bigger new construction, I've seen it down to like 70%. On, the most achievable is usually like your range of, let's say 6 to 12 units. Like that, I usually see it because, overall, the values are pretty easy to figure out and they're usually pretty close to the debt that's supported.
So that's why when you see, even if you're going traditional CMHC and you're going, I'm using a 1.3 debt coverage ratio, even with the value of the building, especially when cap rates were lower, you might be borrowing, like you said, 70%, or you might not be able to get above 75 or 80% anyways. But now, if you go MLI Select and you save those 0.2% on the debt coverage ratio, that might bump you from 80% to 85 or 90 possibly. So you'll be able to borrow possibly more. But just because you hear up to 95%, you still have to meet other criteria. And, with the low cap rates we have here, you often don't meet the criteria to get close to that 95% loan to value. So don't expect that, but you can get closer on MLI Select. There are a lot of costs to CMHC as well. There's a lot of fees, there's a lot of studies and reports and things like that. So when you go commercial, there's a lot of extra costs that people have to be wary of. But we've gone kind of long. I want to ask you, we're just going to do one. Tell me about one of the worst deals you've ever worked on, because I know you've worked on lots of great ones, and it's awesome, but I think we learned the most lessons from the one that have gone poorly. Tell me, either for yourself or for a client, what's one of the worst deals or your least favorite deals that you've worked on, and the lessons learned from that?
Yeah. So my least favorite is actually one that I didn't end up being the mortgage agent on, but it was originally brought to me through a realtor partner, and ended up, there was the problem with it was that the zoning for the property basically ended up, the seller or the buyer just went ahead with his plan. When he talked to me, he knew what he wanted. He wanted to put 7 units into this thing. We did all the numbers based off that. I very well articulated to him that if this is not possible and you must check all these things, like, we are going to be a fourplex at the end of the day. And when we switch from commercial financing at 5 units to a 4 and under, the issue is you switch from being, an income-driven approach on the appraisal to being a comparable approach. And that destroyed his numbers. And so what ended up happening, which most people can guess, is that he did not do the due diligence properly to actually figure this out. He didn't get a hold of the city till like 20 days before closing. And then very plainly, they said, no, you cannot put the 7 units you want to put in there. And so it destroyed the deal. And basically, at that point, I told him, like, he switched instantly to try to blame me. And I said, man, I never once tell any of my clients, even if I've pre-approved you, I don't, if we're talking res side, I do not tell you to waive your financing condition. Like, that is usually the Hail Mary. I convince everybody, please, if you're doing a bigger project, like 45 to 60 days, leave your financing condition in there, because it will save your butt a lot of the time. And yeah, unfortunately, that deal didn't work out for him. It put him in a terrible position. I didn't even end up doing the financing for him because it was just so much that I was like, listen, I covered my bases on these with all of this. The problem is you need to communicate with the city. We learned that a lot in our project. Like, as soon as you see a deal, you should have an architect in your back pocket, a designer. You should be able to send them the address and say, what's the max units we can do? And what is the zoning allowment? Do we need any minor variances? Like, get those questions answered as a part of due diligence. Throw it on the checklist, because having those will allow you to quickly analyze deals. And also, the city is going to, if they say no, you're screwed. Like, you do not want to go through a rezone. You do not want to, like, minor variances. Yes, it can happen fast. But when you, let's say you take a loan that's private, you're going to eat through your carrying cost very quickly if the city ends up delaying 2 more months, 3 more months. So the number one thing when using, let's say, and this was private financing, when using private financing, is have your ducks in a row. Like, mortgage agents out there will put you in private financing without having the proper answers. I think the number one thing is you have to do the due diligence. Like, make sure the zoning's correct, make sure you can do it, make sure you can cut the windows, like, check the whole building. That would be my number one.
Yeah.
That was
and I will add that from your example, it sounds like they didn't do their due diligence. Like, they didn't even start that part of the process well enough at all. There is some risk regardless, because the city can say, yeah, we're in support of this. And then neighbors come and complain and they oppose, a minor variance, and you're fighting and it takes longer, and, you're paying consultants. And there's a small chance, even if the city's in favor and the rules should apply, that for some reason you get denied or need to change it. So there is some risk there regardless, but to not have, started that process in the first place, spoken to experts who are like, yeah, I've seen similar stuff, there's a 90, +% chance you get this approved. And so you kind of take that risk with some backup options and understand, if I were to do 10 of these deals, it would work out on 9+ of them. So on average, it's going to work out, but I'm going to have some reserves just in case this one doesn't. Yeah. And that is the thing. Like, that's one of the reasons why we don't have enough housing, because of the risk associated with this kind of stuff. You need to build in more of a profit margin to account for that potential risk. So absolutely, I think those are valuable lessons learned. Zoning is important. You can't just assume you can do something, like changing all the storefronts on your building to all residential. You can't just assume you can do that. And then you get in, the city says, no, all main floor needs to be commercial. Now you can't qualify for CMHC at all anymore. You're going with different financing and costs you a lot more. Can kill your deal.
Yeah.
So,
obviously.
Before we wrap up, I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
What has changed about your approach to doing mortgages with your experience?
Sure. So for mortgages, I mean, through my personal real estate investing, it's funny, like, because people come to me with questions all the time. They always want to know what I'm thinking is the best. And, you know, thank God I actually have my own project to be able to base this on. And I don't just give empty, you know, opinions without actually doing it myself. I'm very strong on the commercial side. I convince everybody, you know, that there is a good part of it. I still have a lot of clients that do, you know, no commercial conversions, and obviously there's products out there. But I think what has changed in the market today is trying to find strategies for my clients to keep growing and scaling that have matched bank products. Because right now, you know, a lot of people went tertiary market investing, and now it's really difficult because everybody was doing 75% loan to values. Now big banks have cut back on tertiaries down to like 65, 70%. So what I'm trying to do now is make sure when I'm giving someone advice, it is backed up by either a backup plan for sure of like just in case, or I just steer them away from tertiary markets right now. Because if they don't have the funds to actually like weather that, or they don't have the lift in the building, then we need to make sure they can exit out. So I'm basically, you know, as tertiary as I go, like honestly, it doesn't even sound tertiary, but like St. Catharines, well, in like that area, that's still a really hot area. Even there, they're starting to pull back to 70%. So it gets pretty difficult that when you look at those areas that everybody knows is posed for high growth and is a great area, if those are getting hit, then tiny Ontario is definitely toast. Like it's the little ones that had really high returns are going to be the ones that get hit. So I basically just say, where's the most bank products? What can you execute the quickest? And that's basically how it's changed. It's just changed with the industry.
Absolutely. I think financing is such an important part, especially for commercial properties, but real estate in general. Leverage is so important, and the ability and the cost of financing is so vital. Next question. If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you'd have for a younger you? And I mean, you're already quite young.
Yeah. I'm definitely young. I would probably just say trust myself more. That's it. Like, you know, I've always been someone that just dives into things. So I know I have a strong inner voice, like, and I can hear myself, but I've always been someone that's dealt with anxiety and stuff like that. So it's a superpower for me. It helps me be able to analyze situations fast, but I would really just tell myself, like, trust yourself, like, understand that you'll make the right decision, listen to people, take their considerations in, but at the end of the day, you know what's right every single time. So just trust yourself. Don't be anxious over something so stupid. Like, I think instantly right now, just about like sitting there doing a test that's multiple choice and questioning a question 6 times in university. Like, I'm like, you know the answer, just circle it and fucking move on. Like, yeah.
All right. Last question. What is the most overlooked or the most overhyped investing strategy right now, in your opinion?
Yeah. Okay. So most overlooked, I think I've talked about it for an hour, is probably commercial conversions. I think it is, you know, something that has a lot of growth, a lot of benefits. We've also looked at some of the negatives, but I think overall it is probably one of the best if you want to go CHMC or you want a great building that, you know, no rent control.
Yep.
Overhyped right now, I would say overhyped investing strategy right now. I would say I still see way too much BRRRR content out there in the world right now. And I think it is a slight, it's still possible. It's still possible, but you need to be an executor right now to get a BRRRR project done over the finish line, no overruns on cost, you know, perfect bank financing. You better be a strong borrower with a strong portfolio and a strong sponsorship team. And sponsorship team is just, you know, architects, having your construction GC. I think the BRRRR is still something that everybody sells because everybody knows the acronym now. But I think that's the most overhyped. Please do not think you're getting 100% back out of your buildings. It isn't average unless you take a massive risk, which then obviously comes with a massive potential loss. You know, BRRRRs can happen. I would say, you know, expect to leave, you know, be comfortable with leaving like for 5 to 15% like in the deal. You know, it's getting hard to go out and raise money these days. Don't be promising anybody, you know, all of the returns plus 110% in this time frame anymore. So I would say that the BRRRR is probably the most overhyped.
Great. All right. Nicholas Brown, where can people find out more about you? Where can they follow you? Where can they reach out to you if they're interested in learning about commercial mortgages or working with you?
Sure. Super easy. It's at The Mortgage Architect on basically every platform, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube Shorts still. I think we are basically everywhere. But yeah, just at The Mortgage Architect. And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll talk to you later.
Awesome, Luke. Talk to you later. Been fun.